To create computer games. Welcome.
Hello, do you hear me? Yeah, I guess so. Okay. Should I start now or should I wait until the time is exactly 40? Anyone knows?
Maybe 1 minute, if you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Затруднял выйду. Okay. Hello, my name is Renaldas, Zioma, and I work at Unity. It's one of the largest companies that produce tools to make games. So, what if I told you that the game development, the game industry itself, is the largest entertainment industry? I guess some of you know, some of you might actually disbelieve the next slide. And even the people who know that the game industry by now is the largest entertainment industry, they don't think that there is such a big difference between the movies and the games. So the movies today, it's like the green line on the bottom, that's the revenue from the movies, including Hollywood, all those blockbusters. And the yellow line on top, that's the game development, game industry. And you can see the trend. It's still continuing and accelerating. That's pretty tremendous revenue coming from the games. So why is that happening? Why this such a strong growth? So classically, it was the consoles, new generation of the consoles that would drive buyers to buy games. And you can see the influence in that. There's a PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation 4. However, since 2008, we have one more player which started boosting game industry. It's in coming of the mobile phones and the gaming to mobile phones. And to a large extent, that's App Store and digital stores that allow to sell the digital content to people. The second or third booster to the growth is the freemium model, which started approximately around 2013 when Apple allowed to have free games that can sell content inside the free game. And the fourth large driving growth is the emerging markets such as India and China. So if we do the breakup like that by the platforms, we will see that the mobile and PC are the driving main growth, while the classical consoles are stagnating. So the mobiles, you can see how the quite strong growth through years, and it still haven't saturated. In PC, we see growth still, and online market is a little bit jumping up and down, and it's kind of stabilized. And the classical driver, the consoles, although rebounded in the last couple of years, but there is a strong downward growth. So why in general, why this growth? Of course, the mobiles, very cool. Digital, cool. But large reason for that is that games became part of our life. There is a 65% of adult population of United States, and in Europe, pretty much the same numbers that play games constantly. So 65% of adults. Worldwide, we have a 2.6 billion people playing games. That's a huge, huge number. 33, that's the average age of the gamer, or the person that plays games. 33 years old. That's before you would think that's the teenagers, but now, by now, there's a lot of people that grew with the consoles, that grew with the games. They are old now, and they can afford buying games for themselves. As well, there's a lot of female game players. And that audience which has money, because they are not teenagers anymore. Interesting model, interesting aspect of the game industry is that the monetization itself is much more flexible than in movies or in music. People can extract revenue through the different sources, starting from ads, combining that maybe with the classical fixed price models, but to a large extent with the in-app purchases and subscription models. So that allows to monetize a large part of the curves, not just one segment, but several segments at the same time. So games can combine that. The same game can combine all that. So yeah, lots of revenue, growth. What are the challenges? So the main challenge, and that's why we don't see that many startups in this environment, is that it's a hit-driven industry. This is a sample from publisher. Basically, it's from the Steam. Steam is a digital store, so it's a sample of one of the portfolio of the publishers. It's somewhat curated, so it's not completely random, but I took that just the sample of the games that they have on the store, and you can see that most of the games, 2/3 of the games are actually below the break-even line. And there is one game which significantly outperforms every other game. So basically that the one game pays for itself, pays for, and manages to earn a lot of money, but it's just one of 10, one of 20 usually. Yeah, so you can see that the red line below is the average development cost, and the blue line is the revenue. Another challenge is the short tails. So the sales themselves, they don't usually, for the normal products, so you should think about the game development, it's a development of the product. It's not like a classical startup which creates some form of the product which can be monetized for a long period of time. Unfortunately, with most games, the monetization periods are very short. They can be flexible, but they're very short. You can see that's one of the examples from one of the games. You can see that there is a launch spike, then there is some promotion spike, and then a couple of other spikes when the game was bundled with some other games. So very short windows of opportunity to earn. So many people think, well, it's just a game, how expensive can it be? In practice, games development of the games is quite expensive. It's maybe not as expensive as movies, but it becomes comparable. That's one of the well-known Grand Theft Auto 5, way over 200 million. It's a Witcher 3, that's the game from Poland. So in Poland, then they managed to spend $80 million on the game. So although many of you probably played Witcher or heard about it, it looks like a nice game, but you should think how much it cost. So what if we compare with tablets of the iOS games, mobile games? They should be definitely cheaper, and they are. However, it's still that's the approximate cost. They don't really publish the cost, how much they spend. The company that made Clash of Clans, it's one of the kind of famous mobile games, but you can judge approximately from now the people working on that. It's around 10 million, the budget for that game. The split, that's pretty much the normal split for any game, big or small, and large part of it is marketing. development itself is not the main part of the money, kind of. In this case, porting is when the game is done, they ported the game to multiple platforms, and the cost of the porting itself, making sure that it adheres to all standards, all the different platforms, it's quite a big cost. There is kind of another myth that only AAA game, that you can do only big game and only then it will make money, which is usually not true, although it's kind of intuitive. People believe in that. For example, that's a Lithuanian game made in Lithuania mostly by one person. And on Steam, that game sold in the last couple of years around 4 million copies, and it brought more than 20 million revenue. So just one person. It's by far not his first game, so he knew what he's doing. Of course, there were other people helping him a little bit, but still, it's pretty good return on investment. And that game is not AAA by any means. So, and in many cases, even AAA games don't have such a return on investment. There is another type of games which are not that much as a product. They have a much, it's kind of holy grail nowadays for the companies to achieve something like that, is to create game which becomes game as a service, playing with the long tail, where the users come back and buy assets inside the game, spend money inside the game. So it looks very attractive, and you can see the two very famous games, Pokemon Go and Crush Royale. So the income is kind of steady, growing over the months from the launch. They didn't have much kind of spikes because the games themselves build as a service for returning customers. As I said, it's probably seen as a holy grail by many, but it's really, and it kind of might look like the games are kind of simple. They are mobile, they're usually mobile games. The content doesn't look like GTA 5, doesn't look like Witcher 3, how Pokemon Go, how hard can it be, right? So many people start thinking, small teams start thinking that, yeah, you can achieve that. So if you are an investor and if team comes to you and says we want to make a game as a service, my advice would be to say no, unless that team made 10 games before and unless they have a franchise attached to that game. Otherwise, yeah, it's you should just the aspect of the server costs. It's like a rule of thumb that can be used to gauge how much money you have to spend per user per day just on the server, on the backend. And the virtue of the games themselves, that they use quite a lot of bandwidth, they require quite a lot of computational power on the server side as well. So those costs might be much higher than the normal web servers. So yeah, don't try to do anything like that unless you shipped 10 games before, and unless you have access to unique franchise like the Pokemon Go. So the reality is that most teams will never go to IPO, but the game development itself is not that much about the startups. It's, as you've seen, those models which are based around the productization, about making products with the short tails, about making several products maybe, about understanding your customers, about the focus. So most game developers don't think even about themselves as a startups. So as an investor, for instance, you might never heard about them. And their goal is not to go to IPO. In the best case, their goal is to create good games, and the secondary goal is to be maybe acquired by some other company. And reality is as well that most the small and medium-sized teams struggle. for most of the time. Even if they have games, even if they ship games, even if those games are successful, just by the virtue of this hit industry, they have no guarantees that the next game will be hit. So it's pretty hard for the single team to survive for 3 years. So in reality, the teams that it's usually the publisher, someone who invests in a lot of games at the same time, has ability to invest in multiple games. That's who is making most money. And for years, this kind of chain or pipeline of business has developed, where there is 3 stages. The developer is someone who makes games, but usually they don't have enough money, and or don't have enough. For instance, no money. They might have enough money to develop the game, but it's usually the publisher who comes and spends money on the marketing. So what I'm trying to say that in game development, classically, there is a bit different way of funding the projects. So there is less of the there are specialized investors like a publisher that together with money, they bring a lot of knowledge about the marketing, and they bring a lot of knowledge about the customers. So it's a combination of those skills. So it's not just money, it's a lot of special knowledge which are coming from the publisher. So in most cases, the game development companies will even not go to a startup events and will not even approach investors for funding. They might approach publishers instead. So what are the opportunities, especially if you are not extremely familiar with the game development? So there is just a bunch of opportunities that I want to highlight briefly. And one is that sometimes both investors and small teams, they get too much into analyzing which genre, trying to optimize for genre. But in reality, pretty much all genres are profitable. You just need to you need to understand that the effort that you are putting must be proportional to the audience and the way of life of the audience, what the audience likes. So as long as your effort is proportional to that, any genre can make money. There is no need to optimize for the particular or overthink the genres. The opportunities in game development are not just making the games. There is a lot of opportunities surrounding the development of the games. So like middleware, building assets, building tools that help people to build assets, or selling kind of shovels to helping others to make games. Data-driven approaches are coming to game development, but they are still many teams are not using. So there is a lot of opportunities in terms of outcompeting other teams by being aware of the data, by being able to take advantage of the data. One of the kind of future opportunities is automatization of the content generation. The content generation so far is the most laborious task. It's more laborious than than programming. Most often on a game, there are more people doing the content, creating levels, creating textures, creating scenarios, making audio, and hence more than people that write actual code. In most cases, nowadays, there is a lot of middleware and a lot of tools that people can leverage. So more and more of the effort and time and money goes into making content. So if we can automatize content, that's a kind of big opportunity in the future. And we kind of, both in game development and others, we can see that AI, machine learning, can help to take on the laborious tasks and do that instead of humans. Not creative, but laborious tasks. In terms of the portfolio investment, in terms of the investments, as I said, pretty much there is the risk of investing in, and I've heard that people do invest in as a funds. They sometimes invest in one game, and that is extremely risky. Most often because even the publishers, even game developers and publishers who spend years and years in this industry, they still cannot predict well the outcome of the single project. That's why it's a still hit industry. There is, although we can use data, although we can use our experience, there is still a lot of unknown how people will react to your game. So in practical terms, investment, you should think about the portfolios of games, not the single game. Single game is way too risky. And just for the closing, I wanted to show the current state of Lithuania is the growth in game development industry in Lithuania since 2000 and 2018. And you can see that it kind of follows how the industry is growing in itself globally, because game development is a global market. No one is selling here in Lithuania. Everyone, pretty much all the products are global. All the services are global, and the global growth drives the growth in Lithuania as well.
Thank you.